welcome to this episode of Chain Conversations. My name is Laura McQueen and I'm the MD here at Leaders. This season is part of a programme called the Leaders Meet Diversity series, which we've been running in partnership with Facebook for a couple of years now. Chain Conversation brings together leaders from a variety of backgrounds across professional sport to share their personal stories, to reflect on their own career journeys, pinpointing some peaks and troughs, some helps and hindrances along the way to share with you. The premise is simple, really. Person A picks person B to interview, person B picks person C to interview, and so on and so on. So over the course of the coming months, you'll really get exposed to quite a lot of independent personal journeys throughout the sports industry. The aim is to inspire you, to energise you, and to showcase why diverse thinking and diverse opportunity makes for a better business across sport and beyond. I really hope you enjoy it and speak to you soon.
I'm Michelle Carney, the CEO of Special Olympics Great Britain, and I'm delighted to be joined by the brilliant, inspirational and fascinating Paul Cleal, OBE, for this latest instalment of the conversation. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks very much, Michelle. A great welcome as well, I have to say.
Not much to live up to for the next 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, indeed. Some people may wish to turn off now, I don't know. But yes, that was really great. Thanks.
No, I've been fortunate enough to have a few conversations with you and chair another session that you're on. You have a fascinating background and history and a huge diverse portfolio. Can you talk about your career journey and how you went from a ball boy at Crystal Palace to holding a number of different diverse and really impressive portfolios?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. I think I was interviewed by Crystal Palace Football Club a couple of months ago, I guess, and they picked up on the time that I was a ball boy for 2 or 3 years in the 70s when the club was in Division 3 and then Division 2 in old money. So that was my first love, really, and my first job, going to football as often as I could, probably from 1974 onwards, and getting the chance around 77 to be a ball boy aged 11, sitting on the stool and on the edge of the pitch, throwing the balls back slowly if we were winning, that sort of thing. It was great. And the reason why the club interviewed me was because one of my current roles is board advisor on equality to the Premier League. So obviously that's one of the parts of my portfolio. One of the most active ones is about half my time at the moment, alongside the work I do with guys in St Thomas's in the NHS as a non-exec director there, and Met Police, where I'm on the management board too as a non-exec. How did I get from the ball boy to that portfolio? Through a lot of twists and turns, I guess, and ups and downs. And sometimes people kind of see what they what looks to them as a successful career and assume it's always been upwards. But I can assure you that there were some down moments too. I grew up in Croydon, went to school there, university at Warwick, did economics, came back to London, 87. At that point, my mum, who had brought me up on her own, was very, very ill with cancer and sadly died. And that was kind of a pivotal moment in my life. I'd just met my then girlfriend, now wife, Suzanne. We'd been together for 34 years. That was a real sort of, I guess, junction point in life. And I joined Pricewaterhouse to train as a chartered accountant. I don't think my heart was in it. And when I lost my mum, I decided that life was too short to do something that I thought was dull. So I packed it in, went to work in the public sector, worked for Croydon Council for 7 years. Either side of, actually, we sneaked in a sort of what was now called a gap year. We took off to Australia for a year, about 1990, and went around the world and won those around the world air tickets. Stayed in Sydney, worked there for a bit, came back and rejoined the council, and then basically got involved in infrastructure and funding major infrastructure projects, and started in the council, but then moved into a secondment in the Treasury, then coincidentally met there a PwC partner who recruited me back into the firm. And my career within the firm from '96 then sort of took off. 5 years there, working towards becoming a partner, financing a whole series of major projects, often raising up to £500 million, which I often say was a lot of money in those days, back in the mid 1990s. And then became a partner, got involved very much on the people side of our business, had a lot to say about diversity and inclusion in particular. The board, or the senior partner, asked me to join the board back in 2006. I was, I think, probably our youngest ever board member at the time, and the first black board member, first minority board member, I think, at the time too. And then had a series of leadership roles in the firm, including running the government practice. I was chief people officer for a period of time, and formed something called the Africa Business Group, which ultimately took me to be a member of the board of the firm in Africa. And I lived out in Nigeria for a short time whilst doing that until 2016. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour back here. Left the firm in 2017 and then started the portfolio of non-exec jobs, which I've gradually built up over the last 3 years. So lots of convoluted twists and turns along the way, when it all went horribly wrong and then went right again. But yeah, been quite a ride, as someone said to me when they described my career.
Yeah. So as a boy, what did you learn that still holds true for you today?
I got this lesson I talk about it quite often from my mum about needing to be better than everyone else, and really strive. She was worried because of my colour that I would be disadvantaged. That's why I grew up using her name Cleal rather than my father's name Monacoso. He wasn't around anyway, so that was kind of the easy choice. But I think my mum felt it'd be easier with an English name, even one that no one could spell or pronounce. So we went that way, and I think, that lesson of having to be better was a really good one, because actually, if everyone applies that, regardless of their background, then they've got a better chance, haven't they? I mean, just set out to beat the opposition, but don't just beat them by one goal, beat them by 2 or 3, and you're more likely to be successful. And I think that, and sticking to always being truthful and honest, is something I learned the value of very early in life, and those lessons stay with me on a daily basis.
So, given you've got this huge, diverse portfolio, working with police, within health, within sport, within education, social mobility, what drives you, and what are you most passionate about?
Well, I guess social justice would be and I wouldn't have called it that 40 years ago, but yeah, giving everyone a chance. So whether it's the stuff I do connected to diversity and inclusion, in football or in NHS and the police, whether it's to do with the way in which communities interact with public services, in education, police and NHS again, then giving everyone a fair chance, equal access, equal opportunities is really, I guess, what drives a lot of what I do. I've never seen myself sort of taking on a career where I just do something that produces something to make money, to sell it to make money. It just never interested me really. So I've always been interested in the experience of people and how you can make it better, and social progress, I guess, and my own progress as part of that. I'm just another person trying to make their life and progress from where I started, and I just want a fair chance to do that, and that's what I want for other people.
Wow. And I loved, I read your blog on business karma. Tell us a bit why you think it's important for people to understand that what goes around comes around.
Yeah, business karma was just a phrase I coined because it was my experience really over a period of years that I noticed that often I would do things, people would ask me to do something to help them, and I would invariably say yes, almost always. Often I would do something and nothing would come of it. Every now and again, something would happen almost directly in return I didn't expect. And often it would just be someone who I'd helped And they 1 year, 2 years later, come out of the woodwork and say, oh, really like you to do this, you know, can you, and something really good can come of it. And I just noticed that whilst the rewards of doing something were not necessarily close in time and space, they invariably did come back in some way, on average, over a period of time. And I noticed a lot of people, I've seen it a lot over my career, people who are quite selfish with their time, who don't help other people. Just I just noticed that what sort of comes around goes around, literally, but not in a one-to-one. You can't just go and help someone and guarantee you're going to get something back. Yeah. But on average, over a period of time, then that I found that to be the case. And I've gone out of my way at times to help people, and it's funny how other people have gone out of their way to help me afterwards. Yeah,
that's that notion, isn't it, of pay it forward. And I know for me, one of the most incredible mentors I had was a lady called Professor Margaret Talbot, who I'd reached out to, and sadly she passed away a number of years ago. But I just kept going, how do I thank you? How do I thank you? And she just went, pay it forward. Do what I've done for you for somebody else, and then ask them to do it for somebody else. And I very much really believe in that, and just encourage people.
Yeah, that's what I always say to people as well, that I don't expect, like, I know there's a couple of people, and maybe one or two of them will see this, but who are absolutely determined to pay me back in some way. And I get, no. You pay me back by doing the same for somebody else. Yeah. And also I take a lot of pleasure in their success. You know, I don't then have to listen to everything I say, of course. I'm not always right either, definitely. But, you know, when they are successful and they get a new job or promotion or whatever it is that they want, then I share a bit in their joy, just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what excites you most about the future?
Probably what excites me most about the future is probably what terrifies a lot of people, which is speed of change. I think we've had a rough ride collectively, you still are having it, and it's sped up change, and it's magnified a lot of, put magnifying glass on a lot of society's problems. So I think we're clearer about what's wrong than perhaps we were, and things have moved more quickly than we could have expected. But I think the way in which, as humans, we have adapted in the last year has been incredible, and that gives me a lot of, I guess, optimism for the future and excitement about the fact that we can change. We've done it. We do it really, really quickly, and I think we've learned some stuff about ourselves in the process that will be good for the future.
Yeah, a lot of the work that you're doing, certainly within the Premier League, for example, and the work that you've done with the Mackenzie Dallas Packer Review and Dial Global, focuses a lot on diversity and inclusion. So what action do you think we should all be taking in order to move that dial on diversity and inclusion? And if we want to create truly inclusive environments, it's a word that we use a lot, but actually, what does it mean? What needs to change?
I think everybody needs to think more about what it's like for people who are not like them. Mm-hmm. Because you see a lot of dismissal of difference, if you like. You've seen it in the recent government review about race disparities, where there's a whole kind of debate basis of, well, actually this stuff isn't that important. It's not so real, maybe. But I don't think people spend enough time really thinking about what it is like to look different. What's it like just to feel like everyone's looking at you when you walk into a restaurant just because you happen to have a different colour skin, and to then walk into another shop around the corner and for the same thing to happen, and for it to happen 10 times every day? What's that like? Well, if you haven't thought about it, you haven't experienced it, it's difficult to be empathetic like that. But basically, you need to think through what it's like for other people much more, rather than just what it's like for you. Your reality is your reality, but other people's reality is very different. I think everyone needs to think about that and think about the unmentioned assumptions they make about people that just make life that little bit more difficult for someone else. and be open to that, and not be guilty about it. I'm not saying, you know, but just to actually acknowledge that someone else's experience is different and maybe more difficult because of something that you've never thought about. And I think if everyone thinks more like that, then the world's a better place.
So it's a really interesting concept, isn't it? And I've had the reverse, but albeit from a privileged position. And you know, my time in Lesotho was one of very few white people, and you know, and I regularly be stared at, and you know, the kids, a lot of local kids would touch me and want to touch my skin and touch my hair, and but it's a different dynamic because I come from a place of, you know, white privilege, although, you know, I grew up with ginger hair and freckles, and from from a very working class family, which, you know, has its own challenges being a ginger kid. Not anymore, but you know, in terms of that difference and the discomfort, I guess I felt by having a different color skin. So it's kind of an inverted thing, but I recognize that that's not you kind of have to turn it on its head and really challenge perceptions, but just that small understanding. And I guess we all feel we don't belong at certain points in our lives, don't we? And maybe just feeling into that. Yeah.
So I think whether it's feeling conspicuous, I mean, and yeah, I mean, you feel conspicuous in exactly the same way that a black person in the reverse situation would feel. It just doesn't come laden with the same baggage, but nevertheless, feeling uncomfortable can be the result of being conspicuous, and that's why everyone needs to think about, I think, their other experience, the other person's experience.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, a lot of us are working and really passionate about shifting this dial and this perception, and really trying to make a huge societal shift. And I know, you know, we're doing it from a Special Olympics perspective to create opportunities for those, and just basic opportunities for those who've got an intellectual disability. This is a really tough question, so I'm just premising it with that, but who really needs to be influenced in order to make that massive societal shift? Where does the balance, where does the influence really sit? I'm not sure if there's one answer or there's lots of answers in order to really shift society.
Well, I suppose if you had to answer it in one word, it would be leaders, in my mind. And who are they? Where are they? Well, people who lead in any, people who have leaders have greater influence than others, if you like. And we're all capable of leading in our own environments, but I suppose the most visible leaders, those that are in government, are obvious ones. They can do things differently. Then you've got sporting leaders, business leaders, you know, community leaders. Anyone who other people listen to is an influencer. It could be someone who I've never heard of, probably on Instagram, who's an influencer. So I mean, anyone who's got the ability to influence a broad sweep of people. Actually, some of the people that I know, probably personally, that most able to do that are current and former footballers who are at the Premier League. You know, they've got kind of a hell of a lot more followers than I have on Twitter and Instagram. So people who've got influence over others, you know, the more they use that in a positive way, the better. But ultimately, you know, process of change starts with a few early adopters, and then the question is, how quickly does their kind of change of mindset, like, or change of attitude, their new idea, how quickly does that idea spread to a broader group of people, and how quickly does that spread to the next group, which is a bit like the way in which a virus spreads, I guess. So you need someone who can up the R rate somehow for inclusion.
Up the R rate for inclusion, and that, I love it. That chain of,
it's about infecting people with this idea that inclusion is something that's really important, an ideal and belonging. You know, that what would this country be like if all the best part of 70 million people in it really felt they were included and belonged, you know, regardless of their social backgrounds, ethnicity, histories, and everything else, and their own individual capabilities, I mean, we'd be unstoppable.
Well, I've just
We
answered my question, which I'm gonna so in my head. But who is the most inspirational person you've ever met? You're up there on mine.
Oh wow! Well, I mean, I thought about the question about, you know, if I think about who inspired me in terms of who I've actually met, then I think in many ways my parents are my most inspiring people that I've met at different points in my life. Ironically, I've had sort of parents in series rather than together. So first my mum for the first 21 years of my life, and then after that really getting to know my dad, and learning about his career and the work he did in Africa. And they are, you know, they're both two incredible individuals to me. I feel very proud to be associated with. And I've had people who I've worked with over the years who I found inspiring as well. My first boss at Croydon Council, a guy called David Wexler, really fundamentally, I think, changed the way I saw the world. He was incredibly egalitarian, very human person, liked to laugh as well. And I took a lot from him, and I've probably followed him more than anything. And if it was someone who I'd like to have met, I would have put Nelson Mandela as being the person. I've got a photo of my dad, Nelson Mandela, but that's the closest I could do a kind of, you know, one step away.
Yeah.
But he'd be the person who I'd kind of particularly admire, I guess.
Amazing. So throughout your career and life, what's the most important lesson that you've ever learned?
So I think probably if there's an old English proverb like honesty is the best policy, then that's possibly it. I see it disappoints me, but I see people trying to, well, not necessarily always necessarily tell lies, because that's outright not the right thing. But people kind of are economical with the truth way too often, and people adopt an attitude to information that they'll only tell people on a need-to-know basis. Whereas my view is always that you tell everybody everything, basically, unless there's a good reason not to, work back from that end. And I think if we all do that, that relies on trust. And at the bottom of all this is trust, and that's what our society is founded upon. You have to trust other people, and if you're able to trust other people, that's a great thing. But it all starts with honesty and transparency, in the beginning.
Amazing. Crikey, I could just talk to you all day, but I'm going to ask you one last question, because we're running out of time. So if you were to meet your 16-year-old self now and have a chat with him, what advice would you give him?
I would say probably a couple of things. One is going back to the conversation we said about help earlier. I think for various personal experiences, felt that I was, I kind of put a bit of a body armor on, I think, sort of in a figurative sense, and didn't want to let myself out and be sort of visible to people, if you like, or people to know what I'm thinking. So I felt probably a bit defensive at that age. So I'd be encouraging my 16-year-old self to be less defensive, more open with people. And I don't mean I stuck to this point about honesty from a very early age, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm willing to trust people with information about me. And if you don't tell people about yourself, you don't introduce yourself, then it's hard to get to know people, to get to trust them, and they won't then help you so much. And there's a link in my mind between all these points about being able to be willing to ask for help and accept it, and also be open with people and build trusting relationships. And that's at the core of what I think I've learned a lot in the last sort of 30 odd years. So yeah, that would be it really, honesty and openness to others, and as the basis for building trust.